This is the Page Publishing Book Club. But you knew that, right? As soon as you hear that music, you know that, right, Rob? Am I right? How you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, along with my engineer, Rob Barretts. How you doing, Robbie? Tonight, we bring you the keys to your future. The stories that will unlock your imagination and create a free flow of ideas right through your fingertips. In some cases, you don't have to look too far. Our first author is a prime example of that. He's got a personal experience, a true story that is, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. Joseph Rosato grew up right here in New York City, and his book called Voices Over Troubled Water is one you will not forget. Joseph.
When I was 10 years old, a climactic event took place, and I ended up being abandoned by my mother on the 59th Street Bridge with my brother, yes.
You were abandoned on the 59th Street Bridge?
Yes. It was a crazy night. My mother discovered my father had an extramarital affair, and he had a shop on 2nd Avenue and 59th Street, antique and furniture shop. Today, where the tram is to Roosevelt Island was his shop, and it didn't go well. My mother probably did something very silly and stupid, and she decided to take my brother and myself and go over the 59th Street Bridge. She stopped in the middle of the bridge and let us out and pulled away.
How old were you?
I was 10 years old.
Oh. Did she ever come back?
No. I mean, I cried my eyes out. I prayed. I heard voices, and those voices are the voices of troubled water. You know, the 59th Street Bridge is the bridge over troubled water.
Yeah.
And those voices told me to, as a 10-year-old, crying and yelling and screaming all I wanted wasn't going to help. And it started to rain, and it wasn't until around 10, 15 minutes later, my father did find us. I did hear the funny horn of the truck, and I was able to get his attention. He actually passed us by. He didn't see us, and for some reason, something made him stop and pull back and pick us up and bring us home.
How old was your brother?
My brother is, he's 16 months younger than I was.
Oh, my God, you poor guys.
Yeah.
This changed your life forever. This colored your entire life, I'm sure.
Yes, it did. And thank God I had a grandmother who took us, and I had a sister too. My sister wasn't left on the bridge. She was a very young baby. Took us 3 kids in. My mother and father divorced. We lived in Wantagh, Long Island at the time. They sold the house when we moved back to Brooklyn. And my grandmother owned the house in Gravesend section of Brooklyn. And from 10 years old on, I was raised by my grandmother. So my grandmother became my mother, and I tried not to look back at that night until 1970. I wondered, there was questions in my mind, what was going on, why did my mother do what she did? And in 1970, I just got out of the Navy, returned home from Vietnam, and I lived in Greenpoint, Brooklyn at the time, and I lived a block from the East River, the river of troubled water, and I went to the river and started hearing those voices again. And I recalled my life, and that's the story of the book.
Why didn't you write this 20 years ago?
I kind of never really thought about writing until I wanted to leave my grandkids and my own kids with stories that they never knew happened in my life. It always was in the back of my mind, and I wasn't sure if anybody would be interested in it. So what actually provoked it all to happen was I was invited to the 239th birthday of the U.S. Navy in Atlantic City 2 years ago, and I was just asked to say happy birthday message to the U.S. Navy, and it turned out that the keynote speaker, Tommy Lasorda of the Los Angeles Dodgers, couldn't make it, and I became the keynote speaker within 3-minute warning to when I was introduced. And there were 500 people in the grand ballroom of Caesar's Palace, and I was in shock, and I looked around and saw that all these people in this room weren't even born when I served. So I decided, well, I have some stories to tell, and I started to tell my sea stories of my experience in in getting to Vietnam, serving in Vietnam and back. And the crowd loved it. They gave me standing ovation. And I got back that night, and I figured I had to put it in writing somewhere. And I started to write, and I handed it over to some friends, and they said, "My God, this is an amazing story. You should write a book." That's how I wrote the book.
I asked Joseph, how did you manage to grow up normal? I mean, without becoming some kind of a nut job or, emotionally damaged. And he goes into that in his book, of course, but it was his teachers, his mentors, and some amazing people that were willing to help him along the way. So a must read for sure. Thanks, Joseph. Obviously we all don't have a story like that, and I doubt anyone would want to go through what Joseph and his brother went through, but still, everyone, including you, everyone has a story. Fred Selak worked for years in the business world, and he shares his experiences through fiction in his book entitled Empty Suits. Now, Fred, you say empty suits is a double entendre.
Well, the term empty suits in the business world refers to a person in a position of authority who is either incompetent or ineffective or both. And that's one side of the double entendre, because the main character, Joe Straight, spends a lot of time coping with empty suits in the business world. The other side is the lawsuit about age discrimination that Joe Straight goes through. So that kind of suit is the other side of things.
And he has all these travels. He goes all over the place. He fights alligators.
I didn't want to dwell on the age discrimination aspect too much. So I went ahead and wrote a book that has some adventure, romance, humor, all driven by an exciting main character.
And this is kind of a culmination of what you experienced in the business world?
Yeah, what I saw happening in the business world. The age discrimination suit is quite different from what I went through, but I was a victim of age discrimination myself. So it is a work of fiction, and it gets into some behind-the-scenes things that happen in preparing for trial, and what people have to go through, psychiatric examinations and so on.
You actually went to trial?
Well, my suit was settled out of court, and I have to leave it at that because I had to sign a pledge not to talk about the settlement. And
where did you work?
Common standard procedure. I worked for a company in Detroit that was in the information business, so I was a victim of downsizing within the company. And the book gets into that as well, as far as how companies go about downsizing. They go after the older employees first because they make the most money and have the most expensive benefits. So I wanted people of all ages to be more aware of age discrimination in the workplace and how it affects the lives of victims. Sometimes it has a terrible effect. In fact, too often a terrible effect. So that's what motivated me to write it. But there's still a lot of work to do promoting the book, talking to people like you, and I have an interview coming up with one of the Detroit radio stations who's asked for a copy of the book.
Great.
The Michigan State Alumni Club is also going to feature it on its site. So we're getting there.
All right, Fred. Well, certainly, an interview with your local radio station, definitely a good start. And of course, this interview with the Page Publishing Book Club. I mean, come on. It's a step in the right direction. Carl Crozier shares an experience he had many years ago, and for good reason. It speaks to the unrest between police and African Americans that's been going on across the country for decades. Carl's book is entitled Some of My Heroes Died in the Riots. Now, you're talking about the riots of the 1960s, right, Carl?
Yeah, the riots of the 1960s.
They were everywhere. I mean, we're out on the East Coast. Newark, New Jersey was a mess.
Yeah, right. In Chicago, Los Angeles.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah. I remember it very well. That's why I wrote the book. I was involved in one when King died.
What happened?
Well, I was on the west side of Chicago the morning after he got killed, and there was a riot went down. I live on the south side, and south side and west side of Chicago are two different cities. The south side was quiet, but the west side, which was more poverty-ridden, erupted. And I happened to be on the West Side when they rioted after his death. And I was trying to make it back to the South Side. There's a street called Madison, which was the epicenter of the riot in Chicago. And it was an experience. It was like I had been in the Army. I'd never been in combat or anything. This was 1968. I was about 28 years old then. And just going through the West Side, trying to get back to the South Side because public transportation was not running. And I had to walk and run through Madison Street on the West Side, which was rioting. And to see the glass broken and the stores being vandalized. And it was just an experience that we, and I say we, my friends and I, had wanted to participate in during the Civil Rights era because starting about 1964, throughout America, there was riots in the ghetto. And we cheered them on because what we felt was that, they were sort of augmenting the civil rights movement led by King, Malcolm X, and others for freedom of black folks.
Now, when you talk about some of my heroes died in the riots, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about people that killed during the riots. The riots were an embarrassment to America. They were part of the civil rights movement. The urban riots that happened in African-American communities during the 1960s were not planned events. They spontaneously happened as a result of some occurrence and feeling of estrangement, marginalization, disparagement, and disrespect by America of black people, as evidenced by history and the events of that era. And each time members of the black community took to the streets and caused mayhem, it brought embarrassment for America, which was supposed to be the land of the free and home of the brave. My book chronicles some of the history that led to the riots and the events of the times, as seen through the eyes of an ordinary, young, coming-of-age black man, that's me, endeavoring to find his way in America, and to acknowledge unrecognized participants in the fight for civil rights. Those were the rioters, those unrecognized participants. I wrote the book in 1975, and I wrote it essentially to tell my son what was happening. He had just graduated from college, and I wanted to leave a record of the 60s as experienced through my eyes. And I let it sit up on the shelf for about 20 years. But because of what's happening, the disrespect of the police have always disrespected us in the black community. And so I decided to have it published because of what was happening now.
Finally, you were able to dust it off.
Yes.
By the way, Carl has reached out to his alumni association at Chicago State University, which is pushing his book. He's also put it in an underground bookstore. But most important, his son has read it, and that's the whole reason he wrote it. And he's hoping it'll be a lesson for his grandson when he grows up. All right, we are going to take a quick break, a really quick break. When we come back, we'll have a New Age children's book. And we're going to explore one of the most popular topics people write about, religion. Stay with us.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. Thanks for being with us tonight. You know, there's children's books and there are New Age children's books. And I didn't even know that till Jacqueline Baglio told me. She's a college student in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. She wrote The Tale of the Pretty Princess, Penelope Lee. So, New Age.
It is. I took some of the elements from older fairy tales, even though older fairy tales were based off more of the storytelling for adults by adults, but this kind of takes the more modernized fairy tales that were meant for kids with my own twist. I put some type of almost self-love view into this because I feel as though you should be your own hero. You need to love yourself first, and The part that makes it New Age is she ends with self-love. She doesn't end with a prince or anything like that.
So teaching kids how to love themselves first.
Yes, I think that's a very valuable lesson, especially with society today, because there's a lot of self-esteem issues in young people. Even women today, we all get very insecure. We get jealous if we don't think we meet society standards. And I think it's important to love yourself as you are and to realize that you're beautiful no matter what.
So you're in college.
Yes.
Why your interest in children?
I think it's because I had a very happy life within my home, but as a kid I was really bullied. So I think I didn't really want to see other kids bullied. And I also have a big Italian family, so I'm always around kids.
So it's your Italian heritage that inspired you to write a book about children. You're around children all the time.
Pretty much. I think everything around me kind of inspired it. I'm trying to be a mental health and self-esteem advocate. That's what I'd also like to do with my writing.
That's great. How do you get this in the hands of children?
Right now, I've been telling people that I know are parents and teachers about it. I know my second cousins love the book so far.
Well, if you have a big family, they should be able to hook you up with some kids, no problem, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Most of them have the book, but I'm still working on getting it out past my family.
You going to write some more?
Yes.
Good. No frogs turning into a prince for Penelope Lee. She learns to love herself first. Nice. We're going to wind up tonight's show with two authors who were compelled to write about their faith. It is, no doubt, one of the most popular and controversial topics that people feel the need to write about and feel really strongly about. So we're going to begin with Joseph Mills, who wrote a book called The Study. Now, you say it's a topic that requires an open mind?
Yes, ma'am. I believe this book helps you to understand God, His Son, Jesus Christ, you, and life itself.
You say it's been under construction for the past 50 years.
Yes, ma'am. I started writing this book around 1966-67 in Moorhead, Kentucky. I had my first college job teaching English. I, at the same time, was working on 3 degrees, and just out of the blue, something said, write this book. And this time was BC. It was before computers. And I was writing it on a big typewriter. And between teaching and studying for these various degrees that I was working on, I would sit down at night and I would just type. I don't know where it all came from. I really don't. I have to admit that. But very slowly, the book came together. And after I left Moorhead and went on to the PhD program at Miami of Ohio, there was about 20, 25 years that I did not write on the book. After I retired and moved back to my home area in Kentucky, very close to where I grew up, I sat down at my computer and everything fell back in place. And I continued to write on the book, and it kept coming together.
Well, you say that the study has a message to readers.
It does.
And that we make a choice every day whether or not to accept God in our life and His protection.
Yes.
You must have felt the need to explore that and to write about that.
Yes.
Did something happen?
Well, I call it inspiration. I think I was inspired. And I read the Bible from cover to cover, I think 7 times. And there were periods in the Bible that I call downtime, where you could not find explanations. And so I kept wondering what happened between point A and point B. And slowly, answers started to fall in place. And I really think that if one reads this book with an open mind, you really do understand your place in this life we live, and
and you understand how God is trying to help you, and it helps you focus more on what you should do while you are here. And I think one of the reasons that I wrote the book is, as I grew older, I realized that I had not done very much to give back to the God who made me. And so for some reason, the book gave me an outlet to try to help others to understand why they're really here. So many people forget maybe why they are here.
Well, Joseph, that sentiment is not so different from that of Dr. Owen Ward, a clinical psychologist who uses his background to look at the New Testament through what he calls the lens of psychodynamic psychotherapy. The name of his book is From Glory to Glory, The Psychodynamics of Salvation in Christ. Dr. Ward.
That lens is provided in the New Testament doctrine of the Logos, which appears in only 4 words in the New Testament in their metaphysical context. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Greek word is actually logos. And so it's saying in the beginning, it's identifying Christ with God as being a manifestation or the extension of God coming into the world. In the beginning was the Word, or logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, and the Logos was made flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. So even though it's only mentioned in that one chapter 4 times in metaphysical context that it expresses, it tells a much different story about the nature of the revelation of who Jesus was as the Christ, and it says something about our relationship to God, because as Jesus was the express image of the invisible God, we too were created in that image, created in the image of God. So what I'm trying to do is show how that through an understanding of psychodynamic psychology, we look at the New Testament idea of the Christian plan of salvation in a different light when we start to understand what it means that Christ was the Logos, and furthermore, that we were created in that same image and likeness. That's sort of in a nutshell what I'm trying to explain. And furthermore, that in the process of understanding how we're related to God through the Logos idea, it connects us with the deep understanding of how life itself is the Logos appearing within us, that we too experience in the same way that Jesus, as the Son of Man, experienced death, burial, and resurrection, as he was exalted, then humiliated, then went through a cycle of death, burial, and resurrection. We too go through that same cycle. And so am I trying to help people see that their life itself is God appearing through them, what is referred to philosophically as a logophany, the Logos appearing. So I try to explain that in ways that are common to the life of every individual. I've taught a couple of courses. I've presented at the Philosophers Roundtable in Yellow Springs, and I presented at a bookstore. It seems like today the marketing is key, and this kind of book is, I think, of interest because of the depth of understanding that this creates, and also because Christianity is an important topic of discussion today, and because it gives a different vision, a vision that's much more hopeful and places us more in relationship to God than we really realized before that. So, I think it's an important topic, but it's also, even though I try to make it very readable and conversational in style, some of it's difficult.
The whole concept can be difficult for some people. So,
well, yeah, because it's rooted in philosophy,
right?
And how many people took philosophy in college?
You can't take philosophy. That doesn't get you a job, Dr. Ward. Come on, you got to focus. No music. No,
that's right.
No.
But actually,
no thinking. No thinking.
Sometimes it's good to think.
No kidding.
Sometimes you can think yourself into a problem, but you can also think yourself out.
What a concept! So, I tell you, there's not enough thinking going on. Just generally speaking. Am I right, Rob? I mean, that's why people used to go to college. I mean, that's what I heard. I heard that once upon a time, you went to college to expand your mind. You went to take courses you might not otherwise take. You went there to learn, to explore, to find out who you are. No exploring. Now you gotta know exactly who you are and what you're doing at 18, right? Ugh, makes me crazy. Anyway, that's what we try to do here on the Page Publishing Book Club. Expand your mind, you know? Think about all the things that go on in your life. Think about things that other people might want to know about. Think about things you need to share, whatever they are. It doesn't matter. Just start writing. Come on. Maybe a story you hear on this show will trigger a story you need to tell. You let us know, okay? We're going to be right here, me and Rob. And we'll be back next week for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club right here and only here on 710 WOR.